Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we explore the inner game of writing and inspire you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe, and this week I'm treating you to the best of the Bestseller Experiment. I've delved through and handpicked my favorite shows of the 500 plus that we've done of best-selling authors who have collectively sold over 1 billion books. Who's it going to be this week? Here's a teaser. In this episode,
the goal of any creative person is to be authentic to yourself and your sensibilities, whether you're an actor or a dancer, singer, writer. I think that's the quest, is to stay honest. So I try to use that as a silver lining, that if there's a problem in your life, fear not, it could make a good story for you later. One of the reasons I wanted to write the book was to be alone. Take myself out of the public eye and be at a cabin and just let your mind soar and your imagination and be filled with inspiration to write stories. So I did the narration for my own book. But again, I had difficulty because you say a line of dialogue or a sentence from your book. I go, no, I heard I don't like the way I said that word. I need to go back.
if we could ask Vince if he could create you the ultimate character for a new show, what would you love that to be?
You know, on the frontal lobe right now is Donald Trump, you know, because he's such a tragic Shakespearean character, yeah. And he's comedic as well because of the tragedy of this man's soul.
Well, if come the election, Bryan, if he does win, do you fancy an extended vacation to Vancouver?
I would definitely.
Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we look to write and publish a best-selling novel in just 52 weeks. My name's Mark DeVoe.
And I'm Mark Stay.
So, on this week's show, we have the one, the only, Bryan Cranston. Walter White, Breaking Bad, Emmy award winner. Mark, give us the full overview.
Well, you know, he's Oscar nominated for playing Dalton Trumbo. He's BAFTA nominated. He's won Golden Globes and Tonys and Emmys. Of course, I first came across him watching Malcolm in the Middle, where he played the dad, Hal. I love Seinfeld. He crops up as the dentist Whatley in Seinfeld, which is a brilliant, brilliant role. And of course, he's career-defining part as Walter White in Breaking Bad. But very few people know that he's also an accomplished writer. So he's in town publicizing his memoir, A Life in Parts, an absolutely cracking read about part biography, part acting memoir, where he takes you through his life and all the different roles that he plays in his life, as, you know, first as son and then student and then father and husband and, you know, and this incredible actor that we all know and love. Bryan, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment podcast.
Mark, how are you?
I'm very good. And how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Excellent.
Good to be here.
Now, we want to talk to Bryan the writer today, not Bryan the actor
I'll
necessarily.
Go get him.
Okay, if you could, that'd be cool. Well, not many people know. Well, they'll know it if they've read your book. You've written a screenplay, and of course, you've written this book. This isn't just some ghost-written celebrity memoir. This is a passion project for you. Is that right?
Yeah, these are stories that I've been telling for a long time, a lot of them, from certainly the ones from my childhood. And then as I go along, I realize what makes a good story is conflict, any kind of type of occasion that you find yourself in confusion or doubt or anything that's seemingly negative or goes a bad way is eventually going to potentially make a good story. So I try to use that as a silver lining, that if there's a problem in your life, fear not, it could make a good story for you later on.
And were there any particular challenges or surprises when you were writing this book?
I can't really. I guess the biggest surprise was putting myself emotionally into that position again. Whenever I was writing a story that was particularly harrowing or fearful, I felt those feelings again. Because in order to truly translate what you're feeling emotionally to the written word, I think you need to submerge yourself in it as opposed to looking objectively at it and saying, oh, he was afraid. I wanted to feel it again and then to be able to convey that feeling.
So, Bryan, before our interview, I just popped onto Amazon and I looked up your book, A Life in Parts, and it has a big word next to it that you may or may not know. It had the big word bestseller. How does it feel to now be not just Emmy Award winner and Academy nominated Best Actor this year, but best-selling author? Is that a dream of yours?
It wasn't a dream. Just like when I've won awards in the past, I don't act to win awards, but they're always nice when someone acknowledges you. And so I didn't write the book to win an award. I didn't write it to make money, although I am being paid for it, but my agents would have to tell you how much I'm being paid for it. I don't really know. And as far as being a bestseller, yeah, I think it could translate to mean that the book is resonating, that people are finding it and recommending it, because you can't get on a New York Times bestseller list unless you've sold a lot of books, and that happens when people recommend it. In fact, I ask a lot of people in the book publishing business, what is the best way to sell a book? And they said, always, it's recommendations. When a friend says, you got to read this book. So very pleased.
Now, as an actor, you'll be used to working in an ensemble with the rest of your cast and crew. Writing is a very solitary experience. How were you able to cope with that?
I loved it. I loved it. You see, if I was a writer full time, you're agonizing over being alone because that's what you do. But my main profession is to be in the public eye. Is I'm on stage or I'm on a film set, and there's a lot of people around, and you go and promote movies, and it's a lot of hubbub and a lot of social interaction. And quite frankly, one of the reasons I wanted to write the book was to be able to still engage in creative endeavor and yet be alone. Take myself out of the public eye and be at a cabin or be at, a beach house and just let your mind soar and your imagination and be filled with inspiration to write, stories. And that's what happened. So it was great for me. The other thing was it wasn't very intimidating because I wasn't writing from page 1 to page 275. It wasn't writing a novel. I was writing short stories from my life. So I already knew the genesis of the story, and I just needed to fill it out and put it down, documented on paper.
But of course, you have written a screenplay, and that's a very different experience in that you're accountable to a director and producers, financiers, and the actors. How was the experience? And that was a screenplay that you wrote from scratch. So how was the experience of that? And would you do it again anytime soon?
To write a book or a screenplay? Oh, I enjoy writing. I enjoy telling stories. So whether you're acting or directing or writing, it's all related. It's all storytelling. And it's the joy. It's my professional joy. And I love doing it. So I want to experience all aspects of the storytelling process. I've written a few screenplays.
Okay.
And, it's very difficult to get them to a point where they're being optioned and actually being made. As I'm signing at the bookstore today, I'm signing books, and I almost guarantee you, and some woman came up and said, had a screenplay under her arm and said, "Can I leave you my screenplay?" And you can't.
Oh, Mark, you'll have to put that one the way you've got then, eh?
Yeah. Sorry, man.
Yeah. Put the screenplay away, Mark. Yeah. Is that what this is?
So, Bryan, with the experience of writing, have you ever been inspired? Because you mentioned in the book, which I absolutely love, by the way, I just have to say, I read it in 2 sittings, which I've got to say for me is pretty impressive because it usually takes me a long time to read anything. I was drawn in by some incredible stories. It made me laugh out loud. The chicken story was amazing. If I really recommend people to read it just for that. But you also mentioned, a lot of very personal details about your life. And you talked about how your dad was a novelist and he was always striving for this dream. Through that, have you ever had a desire to write a novel now, having gone through the process of writing a life story?
I am intrigued by the notion of writing a novel. And at some point, I'd like to take a crack at it to see. And again, like this book, I don't know if I'm really cut out for that. For instance, I did the narration, an Audible book, Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, about a reluctant soldier in Vietnam. And it was a book that I wanted to read. But I never got around to it until I was offered the job of narrating the book. And then I was able to read it. And I was a little saddened by that experience because it told me that, I don't permit myself the pleasure of simply reading a book. But if it's work-related, yes, you now have permission to go ahead and read it. And I was really disappointed that, my life has come to that I'm so governed by the work and trying to take advantage of the opportunities that I've been afforded and grateful for. And so I did that, and it was not easy for me to do that. I also did the narration for my own book, because I can't imagine some other actor saying my words. It was like, it seems odd. So I did the narration for my own book. But again, I had difficulty because you say a line of dialogue or a sentence from your book. I go, no, I heard I don't like the way I said that word. I need to go back. So it took me a long time to be able to get through it, much longer than a seasoned pro of doing narration would do. And out of that, I learned that I don't think I would do that again. I don't think I would do a narration of a book again, because it was not an easy, convenient, simple thing for me to do. I struggled a bit on it. And so I think there are others who could do it. So in that sense, to write a novel, it would be something I would like to try and see if it's if it works out.
Well, you should subscribe to our podcast, Bryan, because that's what we're challenging people to do. We're trying to write a novel within a year, and we're trying to inspire other people to do it. We're getting people like yourself on who've written, and so do sign up and join.
So the two of you, are writing together.
Yeah.
Now, how often do you get together to?
Well, we have story meetings once a week over Skype, and then we'll be writing every day. We've been doing this for about 6 weeks now.
6 weeks.
We have an out
car crash of an idea.
Yeah. The thing is, I've written before. I've written a screenplay. I've written a novel. Mark has never got beyond the 20,000 word mark.
Right.
So he's like, anything's possible. And I'm like, this is really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
It's very hard. Yeah.
I'm completely naive. Actually, talking, Bryan, about your book as well, we've actually got a short clip from your audiobook that we'd like to play now, which is fascinating because it leads us into the question of the importance of character. So we're just going to play that clip now.
Early in the third season, we were doing a scene. My wife, Skylar, had kicked me out of the house, and I was missing my kids, yearning to be with my family again. So I made the decision to move myself back home. When we rehearsed, Skylar entered the house, and instinctively I went to the baby. The director and writer of that episode said, no, we can't have you go to the baby. I was to have direct contact with the baby in subsequent episodes, and they didn't want to cannibalize the coming storyline. That may be, I said, but it's not what my character would do. No matter my sins and transgressions, in my heart I loved my children. I had been separated from my baby daughter. I was dying to see her. How could I just pretend she wasn't there? It wouldn't be true or honest. We talked it over and figured out a workable compromise. Just as I'm going to the baby, Skylar intercepts me. The desire of my character is still there. Skylar's desire to keep the baby away from me is upheld. A good solution. And a good example of how the process can work. Not everyone agrees all the time, but if everyone tries to stay true to their character and what's best for the story, while maintaining patience and respect, a path will emerge. Some actors come into work and wait to be told what to do. I think of my co-star in Barefoot in the Park who needed to be told that she should express affection toward the man with whom she is madly in love. I suppose those actors can do well, but I'm not that kind of actor. I have a finite time on Earth. I am not interested in coasting through it. I want to be invested. An invested actor asks questions that may punch holes in the story or highlight contradictions in a character that writers may not have considered. Asking those questions might mean we have to rethink a beat in the script or redo the blocking. It might mean more work. And that might upset people momentarily. But in the end, I'd rather do more work and get it right and give the finished product a richness and resonance that will last.
So, Bryan, that was such a fascinating clip. And in it, you talked about it's not what my character would do. And this is a theme that I picked up in the book, actually. A lot of times you had these kind of clashes with the writers because you really felt strongly about being authentic and staying true to your character. In novels as well, that's obviously a huge thing. What drives you to stay authentic to the character?
Well, I think that's the goal of any creative person, is to be authentic to yourself and your sensibilities, whether you're an actor or a dancer, singer, writer. I think that's the quest, is to stay honest. I wouldn't say that we had several clashes. In the 6 years that we did the show, there were probably 3 or 4 times that we had disagreements. If you are invested in the storytelling process and you're with other people who are as well, it's inevitable that you will at some point lock horns, because everyone can't follow the same sensibility. You're going to disagree. And it can be done because you can disagree without becoming disagreeable. So artistic frustration is not only expected, it's anticipated and welcome, really. Because sometimes when you get into an artistic argument, you spot a problem and you then have to be hyper-focused on it to carve out what's at the root of that problem. And often the answer will come to the surface, and without the argument, you could have glossed over it. If someone said, well, it doesn't bother me that much, we'll just leave it in. But if you argue a point and do it, respectfully, you can come to find a better way to tell that beat or a more honest way to reveal something. It's actually a tremendous benefit to the artistic process.
I hope you're listening, Mark, because this is going to be us in a few weeks.
You guys are arguing. Yeah, remember that?
Yeah. We'll do it as respectfully as possible.
Yeah.
Now,
I respectfully am calling you a silly ass for thinking that, respectfully. Yeah.
You talk about part of your role as an actor is to take what's on the page and create a character. For us as writers, character is everything before plot. If you don't have a compelling character, you really don't have anything. What do you look for in a compelling character? And of course, you play possibly the most compelling character in television of all time, written by Vince Gilligan, who's a genius. So it's setting the bar pretty high. But what do you look for in a character on the page?
I look for, did this character have resonance with me? Did I feel for this? And it doesn't mean that you have to, it doesn't mean that you have to sympathize always or root for the character, but did this character make a mark on you? Did it make you feel or think? And that's imperative to it. I think of Javert in Les Miserables, where, to me, I think the strength of that character is that he's so noble and so righteous that it got in his way. And what a wonderfully, beautifully tragic character that is. With Walter White, you want to be able to, obviously at first you're looking at it from an objective viewpoint because you don't have a relationship to it yet. And if it affects you from an objective viewpoint, you have to trust your instincts that it will then also affect a wider audience. From that point on, then you focus your attention on becoming subjective to the character. That you don't want to stand in judgment of that character. You want to be inside the skin of that character so that you justify the actions. So when Walter White was going through, killing people and things, from my standpoint, I had already justified why this was necessary, why this, in the long run, was necessary, important, or it will improve conditions, maybe unfortunate immediately, but sometimes you have to live through that.
I mean, that's fascinating because often, as a screenwriter myself, you get notes, make this character more sympathetic, make them more likable. And for me, that's often just the death of drama,
Certainly when there's arbitrary comments like that. I think, since this is the subject matter of the podcast, I think it's important then to reveal what I look for when I choose a project, and it's always the writing. There is no one element at all that is more important than the story. So I look for in fact, you read the book, I use a CAP system, which is a Cranston Assessment of Projects system. And the first item is story. And I separate the text from the story because sometimes you'll hear a story and you'll go, oh, that's a fantastic story. And if you read the book or read the play or the screenplay, you could be disappointed because, they just didn't get it. They didn't capture the essence of that story. Oh, it's too bad. So that's why my first thing is the story. Does it resonate? Is it important? What's the benefit to it? What are we really telling? Is it unique? Is it a different way to tell a love story? Is it, what is it that's different about it? Then if I like that, then I go to the actual text of it. Did this text support that story that I really like so much? If that's a yes, then I go to the character. Is this character integral to that story? And so it has to go in that order. After that, then it goes to the director. Let me meet with the director, a film director or a stage director, whatever, and talk to him or her and find out, are they collaborative? Do they get the same sense when they read it that I did when I read it? Yeah. And so if you're going in the same direction. There's nothing worse than assuming that's going to happen and you feel, it's definitely going this way, and you get on the set or you commit to a play and the director's saying, yes, that's right, it's going this way. And you go, oh my God, we're completely seeing this
different visions.
In different visions.
Yeah.
This is not going to work.
Yeah.
Whereas when you got Walter White, the pilot script, you talk in the book about how you became almost all consumed by this character and you were dreaming about him and you knew him inside out. We're hoping to get Vince Gilligan, actually, who wrote about Breaking Bad, on the podcast as well. If we could ask Vince if he could create you the ultimate character for a new show, what would you love that to be?
If he can create the ultimate character for me, on the frontal lobe right now is Donald Trump, because he's such a tragic Shakespearean character, he's comedic as well because of the tragedy of this man's soul, the delusions that he has and the supreme narcissism, but a beautiful character. I mean, amazing character. And there will be, in the States, there will be classes taught on this election period. Yeah. There'll be books written. There'll be movies made. I'm telling you, there will be theatrical productions about Donald Trump because of the anomaly that he presented. That being said, for me to play someone like Donald Trump, I would first need to have some time to calm down from him because I do have a judgment of him. And it's virtually impossible to play someone that you have a judgment on because then you're slanted. And again, I need to come at it from a place of neutrality so that I can build a character and justify what I say, what I do at all times. It's hard for me to imagine trying to justify what this man has said and done. Mm. So I don't know if it's actually possible for me to play the character, but it would be a challenge.
Well, if come the election, Bryan, if he does win, do you fancy an extended vacation to Vancouver?
It wouldn't be a vacation. I'd be an expatriate.
Come and join
absolutely.
me.
I would definitely move. It's not real to me that would happen. I hope to God it won't.
No. We had a Freudian slip actually before this show when we were kind of looking at all the work you've done. Obviously, you played, Trumbo, and in one of our emails, one of us said, he played Donald Trumbo.
Yeah. Not hard to do.
But I felt actually one of the most empowering things about your book is there were lots of beautiful life lessons that you dropped in the kind of last paragraphs of a lot of the chapters. And that really resonated deeply with me. And even in that clip, you said that part of the thing that drove you to be authentic to your character is, I have a finite time on Earth. I'm not interested in coasting through it. I'm really fascinated to find out how much of your passion and things that you follow are based on this real awareness of your mortality and how important it is to really live each day almost as if it's your last.
Well, I actually don't think it's that difficult. We have reminders of it all the time. We hear of people dropping dead, from young people. You hear of tragedies like that. I think a lot of people will feel that, but they may not be in a position to sense an opportunity to make change, and that's unfortunate. I gave a speech once. I won an Emmy award, and I wanted to say that, I was a kid who navigating through a challenging childhood. I became kind of sneaky and duplicitous and looking for the shortcut. And I said, my family even nicknamed me Sneaky Pete. And so I said, and then I found something I really loved and devoted my professional life to it, and all my energies and intellect and body and soul. And it was something of a beautiful thing for me to find that. And so I said, it's not too late. It doesn't mean you have to enter into whatever that is professionally. But if you remember what it was that gave you joy and love, it could photography or giving to a charity or being active in something, you can reintroduce yourself to that and enhance your life. And so for all you Sneaky Pete's out there, that's my wish for you, is to, reacquaint yourself with something that brought you joy and love in the past. And then, unbeknownst to me, it became a subject the next day from the president of Sony Television, who I have a production deal with, and said, "There's a show here. Sneaky Pete's a show." And I said, "What's the show?" They said, "But what you were a teenager when you were Sneaky Pete. But what if you didn't grow out of that, and you were now 35 or 37? What would you be?" And I said, "I'd probably be a con man." Yeah, there's a show there. So I sat down with a really great writer, David Shore, and together we created a show called Sneaky Pete that is on Amazon starting in January.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so I think it's one of those things, because, and now I granted I do have a platform. So while I'm sending out that message of don't waste time, reintroduce yourself to something. And then something happened out of that was completely by surprise. And I was like, okay.
Go for it.
Why not?
So, Bryan, we're coming to the end of this interview. I want to thank you so much for your time today. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And we just want to wish you all the best with Sneaky Pete's. Obviously, everything, all the best wishes in the book. And thank you so much for sharing your life story with us. As huge fans of Breaking Bad, both of us. You brought us so much joy, and it's been such a pleasure to chat with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mark squared. Thank you and thank you.
Very well.
Appreciate it. Thanks, and good luck to all your listeners in their endeavors to create some really wonderful written works of art.
He's a dude, isn't he?
He is, as they say in British playgrounds now, a ledge. He is a complete legend. If there was actually a knighthood, if he was British, and you could give a knighthood for a a dude or a gent. I think he would probably be one of those, wouldn't he? Such a lovely guy.
Well, he gave such considered answers. It was thoughtful. He took his time. It was terrific. Dream interviewee.
Yeah, and only I think was it Graham Norton and Newsnight, and then us. So yeah. It's marvelous. What really stood out for you, Mark?
Well, I'll tell you the first thing. Firstly, as a screenwriter, when he said, I've written a few screenplays, it's difficult to get them to a point where they're being optioned and actually being made. I thought, thank God it's not just me. But Bryan Cranston can't get stuff made.
You should be thoroughly depressed about that, because you're thinking, if Bryan Cranston can't, then...
No, it's nice to know we're in the same boat, you know?
Yeah. It's quite interesting, because apparently he wrote a screenplay, which he funded himself. He got his wife playing the lead in. And it was when he was actually kind of finishing that up that he got a call from his agent and asking him if he'd like to do a part in the X-Files. And I thought, there's a great link there, because obviously Gillian Anderson appeared in your film Robot Overlords. And I thought, there you go, parallel universe. But interestingly, the story goes is that he was coming to the end of this self-funded film that he was making and running out of money. And he thought, I'll do the X-Files part. And it happens that the director of that episode was Vince Gilligan, who was the very man who came up with the idea of Breaking Bad. And apparently Vince kind of almost wrote Walter White in Breaking Bad with Bryan Cranston in mind, and really pushed to get him as the main actor. So
the character he played in the X-Files was a bigot. He played this horrible, ghastly racist, and he had this thing in his brain that if he didn't keep moving across the country, his brain was going to explode and he would die. And he said, Cranston says in the book that, the genius of the script was that by the end of it, you're actually rooting for this guy, because it'd be very easy to say, he's just a bigot, let him die. But then Duchovny's character, Fox Mulder, he realizes he's also a human being. And it's that great dilemma. He's a human being. Do you just let him die or whatever? And he said Cranston was the only person who was able to humanize a monster, which is, of course, what happens in Breaking Bad. He humanizes a monster. The other little story about that as well is Cranston he didn't have the full funding for his movie, and there was a part of him that wanted to hold out for more money, but actually he got to a point where he said, screw it, let's do it. They made the film with less money than they wanted, but because of that, they finished just in time for him to get this role in the X-Files. If they waited another 2 or 3 weeks, he wouldn't have been available to do the X-Files. He would not have met Vince Gilligan. He would not have played Walter White. And it's all these little things. I know the human beings, we create a narrative when we look back and make coincidences that aren't coincidences and stuff like that. But, our thing, especially with NaNoWriMo on us as well, is if you don't start doing stuff now, when are you going to start it? If you don't start writing that novel now, when are you going to do it? Next week, the week after?
Yeah.
Why not today?
Do you know, it's funny. I was coaching someone just this morning, and they said to me, can you guarantee that, if I were to do this, I would get some form of success with it? And I said to them, I'll tell you what I can guarantee. If you don't do it, there'll be 100% chance of failure. and that's the thing. It's about, you see, there's a real great theme actually throughout his autobiography. And Bryan is talking about all the different things that happen to him, but you do see how the stars align. But in every situation, he's putting himself in the mix. He's going to the audition. He's like, even cheekily, when he got the part of Walter White, he actually forced the decision. They actually chose him without an audition. There were some big actors up for that part. And because he was also being asked to potentially play another role, he put to, I think it was Sony, who were funding it, that he had to make a decision by this certain Tuesday. And if he didn't make that, if he hadn't heard back from them, he would have to choose this other part. And it was a big risk on him, because he may have not been able to get it, but he wanted Walter White role so badly. But, he made it happen. He put himself in the pathway of opportunity. And I think that's a really great lesson for every author out there.
Absolutely. Bryan Cranston talked about his auditioning process, and he said the thing that he does, and again, there's a big lesson for writers here. When he went to the audition, he would, prepare as you do. You learn the lines, you investigate the role. The thing that he did when he was starting out, and a lot of actors do when they start out, is they think, well, what do these people want to see? What are they looking for? I'll try and give them that. He said, no. He said, give them yourself. Be as strange and peculiar and idiosyncratic as you can be. You might not get the part, but you will be remembered. If you play it as honestly and straightforward as possible. You might be completely wrong, but there might be something about that makes them sit up and pay attention, And I think that's we've talked before about writers finding their voice, and I think when you're, like we've said, you might start out, you might want to write like Stephen King or Douglas Adams and try and write in that in that style. But of course, that style isn't you. You are you. So once you find that voice, that peculiar, strange voice that only you have, then you are not everyone's going to like it, but it's you and no one else can do that. And I think if you can do that, then you're much more likely to stand out from the crowd.
Blimey, Mark, you're going to nick my 1 minute motivation. You've been on the Red Bull tonight.
Yeah. Sorry, mate.
No, but it's.
I'll be back to cynical mode.
Yeah, what's going on? You're transforming before my very eyes. What would happen? You can't become the optimist. That's me. I love it.
The thing is, I started out wanting to act, and I used to do a lot of auditions, and I made that mistake. I would go in there thinking, what are they looking for? I should try and give them that. And looking back, I wished I'd been more just me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just given them me. He said it in the interview. He said, the goal of any creative person is to stay authentic to yourself and your sensibilities. It doesn't matter. You can be an actor, dancer, singer, writer. Stay honest.
I also loved, we talked a lot, didn't we, about character with Bryan, and I loved when we were talking to him about who he would most like to play if Vince Gilligan was to kind of it was a dream reunion, which every Breaking Bad fan out there would just love to happen. But I loved the way that he talked about Trump and it gave that kind of actor's angle on it. But something we can learn as writers is he really understands and thinks about a person. He can tell that he spent a lot of time thinking about Donald Trump as a character in the same way that he did about Walter White. I mean, he did become obsessed with him when he first read the pilot for Breaking Bad. He became so obsessed with his character, he couldn't think about anything else. And I think in some ways, an actor's view on a character is often different from an author's view on a character, because as an author, we separate ourselves often as we are the author, we're the narrator, and we're forming this character as if we're playing with this piece of clay in our hands and making a character. Whereas an actor has to become the piece of clay. And Bryan actually said that he always looks for story first, which is interesting because we always talk about in book writing, it's all about character first. But from an actor's perspective, it is about story because they create the character, right?
Character and story are very closely intertwined. And if you look at, I think it's a good exercise for any writer, look at characters like Trump. And then try and imagine them in their quieter moments, when he goes home at the end of the day, just before he goes to sleep, when he's having a pee. Just ask yourself.
I don't really want to imagine that personally, but...
But you have to. That's the thing, you don't, but you have to. Yeah. He talked about getting under the skin of the character. Particularly, a lot of actors will tell you they love playing villains because you are shedding your own skin, which might be an altruistic kind of person that you are, and you can become this evil bastard for a few minutes, on stage. And there's a vicarious thrill in doing that and being the villain and being the bad guy. And just for a moment, imagining what that's like. And I think if you're a writer, if you're playing your villain, it's very easy to make your villain a pantomime villain, or a trope or a cliche. But if you can give them some wrinkles and folds and make them a bit more interesting, find the trope and turn it on its head, get under the skin. And, if you're writing characters, I think that's kind of essential.
Absolutely. And I think that when you look at, the anti-trope, you look at Breaking Bad, and when we talk about characters, obviously Walter White, just an incredible character, but on top of him as a part, the thing that I loved, and it is my favorite TV show ever. So if you haven't seen Breaking Bad, I struggled getting through episode 2 on season 1 because there's something that was really quite grim that happens. But if you can get past that, do it. Because once I got past it, I was hooked. And you kind of meet two different types of people in the world. You meet those that have watched Breaking Bad and those that haven't. It's like
those that have yet to watch.
Those that have yet to watch it, you have to see it. But the thing that I love about that show, from a character perspective is I don't think I've ever seen a show or film even that had such strong characters. There almost wasn't a single character that was carried along in that each one of them was so brilliantly developed. And obviously, Mr. Cranston, he was so crucial, obviously, what he did, but it was also the play between him and Jesse Pinkman, his kind of sidekick in some ways. And it just reminds me as a writer, it's so important to spend that time developing the character, because that's what they do on these TV shows. They don't just come up with a name and start rolling with it. No. It's a collaboration between the actors, the writers. There's arguments on set about what they should or shouldn't do, which is authentic to the character, as Bryan said. So you watched Breaking Bad, didn't you, Mark? You've seen it?
Oh, I love Breaking Bad. And one of the things I loved about it the most was that there were consequences. So if someone was, say, shot in the leg, that may or may not be a spoiler, they are still limping 6 seasons on or whatever. It's not like your regular cop show where a guy gets shot in the leg and next week he's fine.
Yeah.
Every action has a consequence. And once you realize that, then the smallest things done by characters can have the most enormous consequences. And it was just gripping TV. It was a classic example of, I'd go, I'll just watch one. And then 3 hours later, because you can't, I'm not into binge watching.
Me neither.
I can't do that thing.
I can't do it.
This was one where I would watch 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And
I was the same. If anyone is thinking of writing any book, I would say watch Breaking Bad once and then watch it a second time to actually study the characters, study the twists. There's so many things that we can learn from that piece of writing. I really don't know if there'll ever be a TV show that will top it, to be honest.
It's redefined what TV can do and what TV can be, and you see shows that have come in its wake that are following a similar kind of format. And this is why we're living in a golden age of TV now. This is why movies are about comic book characters now, but TV drama is about characters of real depth and complexities that have you hooked week after week.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to the interview, Bryan talked a lot about this authenticity. And he said, if you've invested in the storytelling process and you're in with other people who are as well, it's inevitable that you're going to lock horns at some point. Now, in some ways, that's also the relationship between the writer and the editor. In our case, it's probably going to be, it will be between the two writers of a book.
Well, it won't be, because I'll always be right. So, let's just make that clear from the very start.
I was going to make a reference about trumping me, but it's probably not very very good use of that word right now. But and I think actually that also happens internally, individually in each writer's mind, because there's the writer who's wanting to just write what they know and feel they should write, and then there's the other, the kind of professional writer who's thinking, but what should I be writing for the market, for the audience? So there's almost like this kind of schizophrenic character inside everyone's heads. And
there's also the thing that, you'll be writing and certainly on that first draft, you'll be thinking, oh God, this is terrible.
Yeah.
Why am I even doing this? And we all get it. Every writer I speak to has the same thing, where they get to a point where they think, I just can't, I'm not a writer. I can't do this, and that you have to have that other voice say, no, well, this is a bit crap to start with, but you have to keep going. It can only get better. It can only get better.
Absolutely. Now, Mark and I are going to do a little bit of a DVD extra, as it were, which you can get if you're part of the mailing list. So if you want to kind of really delve a bit deeper with us about things we can learn from Breaking Bad as authors, and you're a big Breaking Bad fan, then pop over to the website. And shortly after this interview goes live, we'll put up another short little extra that you can only get if you're on the bestseller experiment mailing list. Just generally talking about Bryan Cranston's book as well, A Life in Parts. It's a really cleverly written book, because as an autobiography, he uses the beginning of each chapter as a different role that he's played in his life. And it's very cleverly done. It's chronological, but some of the stories that he tells in that book are quite incredible. Very difficult, upbringing in his family. But he always knew that he was destined to follow his dreams and passion. And I think, as a writer, if you're want to be inspired, it's definitely a good book to read. I came out feeling massively inspired by it because of a lot of the life lessons that he also talked about. What did you really pull from that, Mark, in terms of this idea of like following your passion?
Well, he said a thing about it's never too late to reacquaint yourself with something that brought you love and joy in the past. So if you're someone who loved writing in childhood and you've come away from it and you think, oh, I'd love to do that, but it's too late. It's never too late. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. You're not going to suddenly be, Dalton Trumbo overnight, but if you start writing, you're going off on that journey, and you're much more likely to succeed. So I think, find that thing that you're passionate about, that you love, and have a go at it. And I think that's something we can definitely take to the bank.
Well, completely. Well, he also talked about having a dream in the book, and he talked about that his dad always had another screenplay or a novel on the go, and the thing about his dad was he kept his dream alive. And then Bryan said, and I quote, he said, "To achieve a dream would be great, but what is more important was to have a dream. That's where hope comes from."
He said the mistake that his dad made was that his father wanted to be a star. And he said the gulf between being a jobbing actor and being a star was so vast that he was always focused on that unthinkable thing on the distance rather than being in the moment. And because he didn't focus on his craft and working and improving himself as an actor, he never became a star. And Bryan said that what he did, he was never interested in that. He loved the work. And this comes back to what we say about, sitting at the chair and writing. And, even when it's hard, even when it's difficult, when you're not in the mood, you can't sit there thinking about winning the Booker Prize. You've got to do the grind, you've got to focus on that. And then once at the end of the day, when you've done that, then have your little daydream about, topping the New York Times bestseller charts.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, treat yourself, make it a carrot on a stick or whatever. But I think it's very good having a dream, but you've also got to live in the here and now. I think you've got to tap those keys and get those words up.
Yeah, absolutely. And he actually mentioned the book as well, on the kind of theme of letting go. And he said, and it's relevant to writers, he said, at its heart, there is an element of mystery to any craft that takes you inward. Writing, meditation, yoga. Ultimately, it's about letting go. And what this is challenging all of us to do as writers, not just me and Mark, but everyone, is this idea of how do you let go of outcomes? How do you become unattached to outcomes? And in your craft, let go inwardly so that you just become that writer that you already are. It's the blocks that are actually stopping you from becoming that writer.
I mean, I'm enjoying just working with you and putting this story together, and the problem solving and the characters that we're coming up with. That for me is job enough. I'm good enough. I'm enjoying that day-to-day process. And if we can get something like a bestseller out of it, and that's the cherry on the cake.
Absolutely.
But if you can't enjoy the daily grind, then it's going to be a bit more difficult. But I'm having real fun doing this. So.
Yeah. It's all about the journey, not the destination. But we're very much on the we're on the inside right now, developing characters.
Yeah, I mean, there's no point thinking about the marketing because we got to finish the bloody thing.
Exactly, absolutely.
I mean, like we said, we've spoken to people like Vix in the first episode who said very wisely, consider the reader, consider who's going to read this book, and we have, and that helped us come up with the idea. But now we're in the middle of the story. It's becoming its own thing, and it's evolving. It's becoming fun. It's weird. You're juggling so many things and ideas. It can be a bit overwhelming, but I think it has to be a fun struggle.
So, if you want to carry on this conversation with us, we're going to do a little bonus feature on the website. So, pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com. Let's move on, Mark, because we have a question of the week this week, and it's really aptly about character as well. We'd like to thank Patricia Huntley on the west coast of Canada for asking this question. And she asked, is it easier to write a dramatic or comedic character? And Mark, I believe you've actually written both those. So what would be your take on that?
I think it was the actor Edmund Kean, the old Shakespearean actor. Apparently his last words were, "Dying is easy, comedy is hard."
Wow.
And he's not wrong. It's started out with running a theatre company with my wife, and that's how I started writing plays. And I fancied myself as a comic writer, and you soon find out if something's funny or not in front of an audience. It's because if they don't laugh, it ain't funny. And, I try to inject them with pathos as well and have some serious drama in those stories too. It's not the same, but they have the same kind of root. There's that tragedy can be actually quite funny, and also humorous stuff can be quite sad. You'd see someone fall flat on their face. It's funny for everyone except the person who falls flat on their face. So
you've got the case of, with Bryan Cranston, obviously he played quite a comedic actor in Malcolm in the Middle as the dad.
Yeah.
And yet Walter White was a very dramatic character, but there were elements all the way through Breaking Bad where there were laugh out loud moments.
Yes, it's a very funny show.
So you don't have to think about writing a character as comedic. You write a character and create comedic moments for that character, depending on, how you dramatize them. So
yeah, you look at Steptoe and Son. Okay, one of the funniest, which became, if you're in America, it was remade as Sanford and Son, which is tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. Okay, you've got the son who's desperate to escape his overbearing father, and it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen, and that's because you watch it with through your fingers, covering your eyes, going, "Oh, don't do it again, don't fall for it again," But it was incredibly funny as well.
Excellent stuff. If you have a question yourself, please do get along to the website, bestsellerexperiment.com, and you can click on the Contact Us link and you can send us your question there, and we'd love to feature your question in a future show.
Just to say, Dan Spencer sent us a question last week about the average word count of bestsellers. I did do some digging, and I've put something on the Facebook page. Now, there's no conclusive link between word count and being a bestseller, but what's really interesting is that on average, books are getting shorter. Look, he's found some research that looks at the bestsellers from like the 1960s through the 80s to now, and books on average have been progressively getting shorter and shorter. I don't know what that says about our attention span.
And you said there's a link on Facebook to
on our
research.
Facebook page.
Excellent.
Go check it out.
Fantastic stuff. So just before we finish up, we're just going to have a quick motivational minute, because there was something very important which Bryan talked about, and as I mentioned in the interview, a lot of the end of the chapters of the book in his autobiography ended on a bit of a life lesson, and I did pick up a bit of a theme with regards to this idea of having a finite time on earth. In fact, those are the very words that he used. And there was if you want to read the book, there's some brilliant references to where he became very reflective about, what it is to be alive and why we need to follow our passion and follow our dreams. And really, for me, when we stand back from all of this experiment, we stand back every day when you sit down to write, the one thing that we should really be bringing ourselves back to is the reason why we've showed up here. And I believe that every single person on this planet has been given some incredible talents, and it's our duty almost. It's not really a choice. Writing chooses us, music chooses us. And if you feel that this is your passion, that this is your dream, that you came here to write and to change people's lives through your words, then each morning do what Bryan Cranston does. Do what Steve Jobs always did, and that is get in touch with the fact that this is another day in your life. This is a day which you can either spend or you can potentially waste. And when we look at our lives, it's made up of the days. Each one of our books is made up of each word on the page. So make it happen. If you're sitting on the fence and you're thinking, I'm not worthy, and you've got this big self-sabotage voice, tell it to be quiet for the next 52 weeks and just start writing, because it was what you were born to do and it's why you're here.
Unless, of course, you're writing dinosaur porn, in which case you really need to take a long, hard look at yourself.
I can always trust on you, Mark, to bring us back down to earth.
Seriously, it's on Amazon.
Dinosaur porn?
Oh,
Are you serious?
I won't put that on the Facebook page.
Oh my goodness me. Now you got me curious. No, I don't even want to know, to be honest. Okay, question for our listeners here. All right, I'm going to give you my entire back catalogue of music that I've written for Urban Myth Club on MP3 to the best suggestion of what a dinosaur porn name should be, and it has to end in Russ. Okay, so everyone get to the website. We'll set up a thing. I want to know, and I'll personally choose the funniest one.
Dongosaurus Rex. This episode has been rated explicit by iTunes.
Oh. Anyway, we better talk about our experiences with Scrivener this week, because I discovered something incredible, which I didn't know about Scrivener. Obviously, Scrivener is the official writing app of the Bestseller Experiment, and we want to thank Scrivener for sponsoring this show. But Mark and I are writing our novel on Scrivener, and Mark is Mr. Mac and I'm Mr. PC. So we have the most incompatible systems ever. And you actually pulled together, as you discussed last week, like a lot of the notes and things that we've drawn everything to a central place. And you sent me the Scrivener file. And what was incredible is I opened it on my PC without any conflicts. I saw exactly what you've done. And there are very few programs out in the world where you can just share stuff between Mac and PC. That was quite incredible. So they've thought it through, and they've talked about how some people, as a writer, if you have a Mac and a PC, that can be restrictive, but it works. It actually works. It blew me away when I found that out, Mark.
With Scrivener, it's all the same, all built on the same platform, I think. So it's, as someone said on Twitter just the other day, it's Mac-tastic.
It's Mac-tastic. And also, think about this from a perspective. Obviously, Mark and I are writing a book together. So if you're co-authoring a book, that means there's no limitations in terms of using the software with each other. But if you're writing a book by yourself, it's very important to remember that it still is a collaborative process, because you will be getting potentially an editor involved. And if that editor is on a Mac and you're on a PC, or vice versa, you can still work and share the same file. So if you haven't checked it out, they've got a 30-day free trial, especially in this month of NaNoWriMo. Get onto the latteandliterature.com website and download your free trial of Scrivener. Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Bestseller Experiment. We hope you've enjoyed this interview as much as we have. Remember to get to the website if you'd like to get the Breaking Bad special on what to learn as an author from Breaking Bad. And also, we've created a rather fabulous little document for NaNoWriMo, as if you want to have 30 ways in 30 days to inspire yourself to write those 50,000 words, then get over to our website as well and download that special that we've got for this month.
And don't forget, the Vault of Gold gets bigger every week. This week, there'll be added wisdom from Mr. Bryan Cranston himself. I was just saying to Mark before we start recording, I'm looking at the list of authors on this, and it's just incredible. It's gone from being something a few thousand words long to being genuinely this Vault of Gold, It's beyond wildest dreams kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So get on the mailing list, get your free copy, update it every week, and wallow in its goldness.
And we have promised that it will be free, but it might not be after this Bestseller Experiment has come to an end. So do get over and get your copy now. And we should also mention that we have a rather special guest coming on the show next week, Mark.
Yeah, I managed to get some time in the back of a car with Michael Connolly.
I don't think you should talk about that, to be honest.
That's all I'm going to say. Michael Connolly!
I know. Unbelievable. So
tune in, subscribe,
download next week.
Rate and review as well, guys. Thank you to everyone who's left a review on iTunes and a rating. Share us with all your writer friends. We're on Facebook on Bestseller Experiment. We're on Twitter at BestsellerXP. We're on Pinterest. We're on Instagram. So come and say hi. Keep the conversation going.
Fantastic stuff. So until next week's folk, it's goodbye from Mark
1.
And it's goodbye from Mark 2. Goodbye.
Bye.